Hi, Christina. Welcome. I'm Abby Croman. I work with PSU's Impact Entrepreneurs, and I'm here today with Christina Sass. She's the COO of Andela, a social enterprise she founded to connect global tech talent in places of highest unemployment to leading companies looking for quality remote software developers. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here.
You too. So, Andela, can you tell us about Andela and what prompted you and your colleagues to start this company?
Certainly. So Andela is the answer to a model that I've been seeking out for quite a while. I've been working on education for many years, starting in my home state of Georgia, and then in southeastern China and also in the Middle East for a while. So I got to see kind of a broad spectrum of what was happening in global education. And in the last 5 years have really narrowed into education that really leads directly into employment for people in areas of highest unemployment. So I've been working on basically looking at what was happening in the education space at the Clinton Global Initiative, was looking at all kinds of different companies and NGOs and governments that were engaging in different ways, innovative ways to try and get more people educated. And then at the MasterCard Foundation was really focusing on employment pipelines. How do we connect people working in primary and secondary education to training, to people that are giving out loans, to people that are doing very, very specific job placement and training. So I've been, focusing on kind of all of those pipelines. And I'd say in the last 3 years, a lot of ideas kind of crystallized in my mind. And so the real background for Andela is this. When looking at Africa specifically, when looking at youth education and unemployment rates, the problems are so large that any solutions are going to have to be scalable, and they're going to have to employ technology. So I started focusing on online learning that could lead directly to jobs that do not involve displacing people from their homes, or do not involve, what we commonly refer to as brain drain, taking the best or the smartest and uprooting them, moving them to a university somewhere else or a job somewhere else. So this was the goal. Educate at scale, in the thousands, and employ people in ways that they don't have to leave home, and so that what they're learning and what they're able to earn eventually cycles back into their home community. So I found a dear friend of mine, his name is Jeremy Johnson, a very successful ed tech entrepreneur who was building a company that very successfully had basically leveraged online learning for graduate degree programs. The company is called 2U. They build graduate degree programs with places like Berkeley and Georgetown and USC and UNC. And they have, the reason why I got so excited about the tool that 2U had created is they had better educational outcomes. So the students learned more and better job placement rates than on-campus programs. So this is unheard of in education, period, but this is transformative for when you apply the same tool to an African context. So a student can learn, train in something like nursing and can do hands-on work at their local university, but train from a world-renowned expert online, and in a way that 2U basically worked with professors to give an immediate feedback loop between what students are learning and what they're teaching, and what students are learning and not learning and what they're teaching. For African students, this is unheard of. It's largely, this is a gross generalization, but what we see is colonial education that is woefully behind and not connected to any local job markets. So this is where I honed in. Okay, you found a tool that can connect students anywhere to existing jobs and do that very, very successfully with high degree of quality. So I set out through the MasterCard Foundation to look for blended online, offline learning that could bring a lot more students in Africa onto the grid, and then look for huge pools of jobs. Where were there jobs in the thousands, new industries coming into Africa, really anywhere where we could find a job that we could create a training for that would employ people in the thousands, and then match the training with the employer and put people through that pipeline. That was a great idea, but for a lot of reasons that rules about how the MasterCard Foundation could and could not disperse funding, what 2U's general market was and sweet spot was, it just didn't work. But the idea was a sound one. And so this was part of the birth of Andela. We looked for, we were basically like, why don't we just do this? It's a really good idea. We think it'll work, and we think there are plenty of jobs that people can do online now, so let's build it. And so Jeremy and myself and two incredible entrepreneurs, a young Nigerian and a Canadian, that were doing something similar, we all sort of pivoted, focused our time and attention on this one problem. Where can we build an online platform, online and offline, in places of highest unemployment, that would both train and educate people so that they could have a career path, not leave home, and not go into debt. And that is what Andela does.
Oh, thank you. So you, just that. No, I'm sure it's a lifetime of work. I imagine we could talk about just one piece of that. But just taking a step back, you mentioned your work with CGI and MasterCard Foundation, and that it seemed like there was a gap in creating pathways to jobs. How did you pick jobs as the approach you, in particular, would take to improving lives?
Well, I'll tell you, it was not a linear path, and it was not organic. When I first started out in education, I was a purist. I thought we, should basically provide the, the best and broadest education to expose young people to that which ignited them, that which would, make them come alive in whatever it was that was important to them. And then I worked for and built a lot of youth programs that were intended to, broadly expose young people to different ideas and teach morals and ethics along the way. That was sort of like well-rounded leadership development. And then the truth is, then I experienced real poverty. Then I went to live and work in some of the poorest places, and places like the Palestinian territories, where people are literally, geographically locked in. And even if they were absolutely unbelievable at some skill, unless it was a marketable skill, unless there was a job for it, they could not, basically unlock their talent to free themselves, their families, their communities of the poverty that they were in. And so I started looking at education from a much different lens, which is targeting the poorest, targeting places of worst education and highest unemployment, and looking at the most efficient ways to get people into jobs. And sometimes that can seem somewhat uninspiring. But what I did was really step back and look at what it is that I truly wanted to do. And after lots of sort of soul searching and reading and talking to young people, talking to hundreds of young people, I did want to unlock their passions and whatever is important to them. But ultimately, what I wanted to do is end suffering. I wanted to end suffering and work on freedom from fear, freedom from want. And I detached from my view of how that would work, and just asked them what they want and what would do that for them. And the answer over and over and over and over again was, I want a job, I want a job, I want a good job, I want a job that allows me to do what I want with my free time, I want a job that allows me to build a family, to have a family or build a business. And the disconnect is between old education systems and new businesses. And those two things just, over and over again we see do not meet up. There's a great McKinsey study that says employers and educators need to step into each other's worlds. Right now, they're very separate, and that works for no one. Students do not feel that they're prepared. They don't feel ready to go out and attack the job market. Teachers say that students are ready, and employers say that students don't have the skill set that they need. So everyone's talking past each other. So I focused narrowly in on how do we make this connection, make the meaningful connection between employment and training, whatever that looks like, that connects into local jobs. And oftentimes those are not the most sexy and most fun jobs, but neither was my first job. So it's more...
What was your first job, Christina?
Huh?
What was your first job?
I worked at a luggage store. I worked at a luggage store at our local mall. It was a friend of the family's that, you know, offered me an entry-level sales job selling suitcases. And, you know, I worked nights and weekends, and but I distinctly remember my first paycheck. I remember learning to save from that. And then I traveled quite a bit, and in college in between, I would have 3 months here, 2 months there, and so I would do catering. You know, I remember catering weddings and other events, and A, learning valuable skills, and B, also learning the motivation to know that I didn't want that job forever. So that's it was really seeing that stable employment is what will unlock a variety of different freedoms for young people to do what they want, to pursue what they want, to have a different kind of stability, to have the kind of dignity, to have a place of standing in their community that I refocused from, you know, if they want to be a poet, you know, let's unlock that to no. If there's not, you know, there's going to be no ballerinas in this community, where are the jobs that are available? We're going to focus entirely on that.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and probably something that you can bring uniquely with your perspective from these various institutions that you've worked in, like the MasterCard Foundation and Clinton Global Initiative. Mm-hmm. Were those the places you mentioned that you've talked to thousands of young people? Was it through those jobs, or how? Like, can you talk a little bit about that process? How you asked thousands of young people what it was that that they wanted?
So I definitely had this experience more in the field than anywhere else, and so I worked in southeastern China. That's where I worked with Professor Ferry. We were there just outside of Guangzhou. We were working with a fairly privileged student population at that point, but I traveled all over Southeast Asia and met and volunteered with different young people. Then I volunteered and helped to build a program for our young women in Kenya, and spoke to just hundreds of young women there that were receiving loans to go to school and had to keep up certain grades and things, and again focus exactly on skill sets that were employable. And then also in Nablus, kind of in the heart of the West Bank, the Palestinian territories. Certainly with my, so CGI was more of I was based in headquarters, and I was looking at education initiatives across many, many sectors. But I did get to speak to extraordinary young people who came to speak, and made an explicit effort to put youth voices into the program, but a smaller number. And then with the MasterCard Foundation, I did quite a bit of travel in East Africa and some in West Africa to visit youth programs and just listen, ask 100 questions. That's how you all are design-focused, client-centric focused is what you do. Say what will actually work for your life. I'll give you an example. We were looking at how to unlock loans and savings for young people, and would do trainings on how do you maximize, how do you responsibly pay back a loan, how do you save a portion of that. Great training, really great training. And then no one would give people loans. No local banks would give young people loans. I mean, that's just a clear disconnect by not listening. It was somewhat irresponsible to do the training, right, when it didn't actually connect to a loan at the back end. So that's something you learn, is to go back and say, all right, wow, we got to really talk to the banks and look at foundations that are attached to banks and microfinance institutions, and come at it from this side. not train people on a product that doesn't exist for them. So learn all kinds of things.
So you've been working with communities and cultures across the world. How do you have any advice for somebody who's working on a social venture that requires them to do something like that, to immerse themselves in a very different culture, maybe one that they don't have an expertise or a background with, or very little experience working in?
I do. So my advice would be to read and do your research to an extent, but then you just got to go. You have to immerse yourself. And my advice on immersion is to probably be a little bit more conservative than you normally would, no matter what the setting is, whether it's Latin America or the Middle East. But to observe first, be polite, be deferential to that culture, and just listen and learn. If you have the time and bandwidth to learn the local language, that will teach you immeasurably more about the culture in which you're trying to work, and will sort of unlock lots of different clues. But again, I would say it's have 100 cups of tea before you start making decisions, and also study it academically. But that will only get you so far. So in order to truly solve a problem, one must do so in connection with the community that you're serving, and think long and hard about who it is that you're trying to serve. And do you understand? Do you understand your product? Do you understand your service? Do you understand your customer? And think of it like that. One of the things that came about with Andela is that I really completely came around on the best way to get at employment. I've worked my whole entire life in the nonprofit sector, although there were certainly pieces of Clinton Global that functioned like a good, healthy startup, robust startup, and it was a revenue generating entity, even though it was officially a nonprofit. But still, when I looked at it, I was like, what's the best way to create jobs? And 5 years ago, I don't know that I would have said, for the populations that I'm working for, okay, a social enterprise or a for-profit business. But now I'm by listening, by seeing where people were actually employed in these areas, is absolutely the most efficient way to create jobs. So that all came about by being immersed, by seeing, and what I would say I do well and enjoy is kind of following the trail. When you talk to a group at a community center and they say, these other pocket of friends, like their parents have worked for the government, and so they're getting jobs, and so you got to go over there and talk to them. How did that work? What were the skill sets that they needed? Where were they? How were they connected to those jobs? How did they present themselves? And then they tell you about some training that they did, and then you go find the trainer and talk to them. So listen, follow. And then use your own problem-solving skills to get at, where you see gaps, where you have a skill set that can fill in a specific gap there.
Thank you. So to switch gears a little bit from jobs, New York Business Journal just named you one of their Women of Influence in Business. Congratulations. And
thank you.
What do you think is the role of women in social entrepreneurship movement and in the future of social entrepreneurship?
So it was an exciting honor, and they asked me about sort of women investors and women in business, and I can speak most powerfully about entrepreneurs in the developing world. So what we know, without any judgment at all, is that women invest 90% back in their families and in their communities, and so investing in young women that want to grow businesses it's just smart economics. They pay back loans and they reinvest in their home communities. So I believe that it will be a much better playing field for all entrepreneurs if it were 50-50. But in the developing world, it's more than that. Investing in women entrepreneurs is it's just a smart bet. We know that the money goes farther and is more impactful in breaking cycles of poverty. And that's, different people have, when they, in learning about financial inclusion and how people spend money, young men are often in traditional roles where they feel like they're a provider, and so they invest in, a business or in agriculture. So that's not to say that, I believe anyone is squandering whatever wealth they have, but we know that that women who own businesses use that money wisely and reinvest and are able to, their children go farther in education. They also have less children that they can provide more for. They're just excellent decision makers with money and with small businesses. And then increasingly we're seeing that those microfinance bumps leading to larger and more businesses. So that's from the developing side. Being an entrepreneur here in the Western world, I would say it's exciting, and I've had such an outpouring of support from other female entrepreneurs. And about 30% of our investors, Andela's investors, are women, which is such a, atta girl. It's very encouraging, and I love it. I think it would be a better environment, a richer environment with better problem solvers if it were 50-50.
Well, I think we can get there. So you're addressing some seemingly intractable problems. You said, one of your goals is to alleviate suffering. That kind of level of initiative could be really scary for anyone, really daunting or paralyzing. Have there been moments that you felt like you don't know what will be your next move, or how do you move through those moments, or that the bigness of the questions that you're addressing?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a great question. It's a hard question. I certainly had moments where I felt moments of hopelessness, or moments of is any of this going to make a dent? Am I doing the right thing? Should I just narrow and help this one community that I'm in right now, or focus all of my skills here? You have to figure out where your skill set overlaps with the real problems in the world, and then once again, divorce yourself, step back, and think about the best way. I've experienced a generation of people that want to found something and want to own something, and I think it's like a wonderful instinct. But once again, it's absolutely best to look at the problem that you want to solve and see if something like that exists. In this unique case, of Andela, I didn't see another way around. I tried through existing large organizations and people that had existing resources and things. As it turns out, some of the large organizations are like big barges, and this one requires a speedboat right now, a speedboat that intends to grow. But form, I know you're in design, form fits function. So what is the best tool to get at the problem that you want to solve? And what I would say about seeing extreme suffering is that you cannot let that drive you to inaction. You can't. You've been given a certain skill set. You've been born in a certain place at a certain time, and it's your job to maximize the levers that you've been given for good. And I've certainly had moments where I've just been absolutely depressed or hopeless or inactive, and then I realized that's just worse than doing what I've done, which is sort of been given a gift to be born in a certain place with a certain freedom to act and act in ways that can alleviate suffering. So let me give you an actual specific. So that was kind of like a lofty answer, but I'll give you a specific one. I went to teach at this community center in the Palestinian territories, and I worked at Jewish camps my whole life. I've an honorary member of the Jewish tribe, but I got this opportunity, and I wanted to explore education in places of conflict and post-conflict, and it was a transformative experience. I went to had to get through 7 checkpoints to even get there, and the community that I worked with was highly suspicious at first, and almost immediately was overwhelmingly positive about the people that were working there. And so I was teaching, and I taught 2 classes to young people, and then a mother's English class, and we literally walked through the refugee camps and asked families what they wanted, and then providing it, looking at the skill sets we had and providing it. So it was just very raw and very incredible way to connect with a direct need and learn what type of education would work. So I met the owner of that program, the owner and founder. His name is Hani Masri, and he's a Palestinian that was an advisor to both President Clinton and Yasser Arafat. Tried to seek solutions between these 2 warring cultures, and Hani decided after years and years of being a part of the political process to that he had to try a different path and work directly with young people and create a generation of problem solvers, etc. So Hani met me, and he said, look, you are able to speak really eloquently about this, and you're able to kind of bridge 2 cultures, and I need you, back in New York, advocating for this and telling people about this and helping me raise awareness and raise money. And so in 1 week, I went from living in Nablus, in the building where I was teaching, that was, less than a mile away from these massive refugee camps, to pitching this organization to Hillary Clinton, to Katie Couric, and it was crazy and insane, and part of me was like, am I doing the right thing? My heart's there, but I have this skill set and I'm able to do this. And there isn't exactly a right answer, but in order to make traction and make ideas move and create a movement, we need people that can do both, that can be in the trenches and that can really advocate at high levels. And it's been a great joy in my career, but also necessary to really do both. So for a while, I felt really guilty about, okay, now I'm in New York and I'm, at these long dinners telling people about this, and I've abandoned these people. Well, as it turns out, we raised a lot of money, and we were able to, double the size of that program. And so I had to shed the guilt and focus on, once again, okay, what's needed, and how does my skill set really what's needed. So that was kind of a great example of having to do it all. And Andela is exactly the same. There are days when we're sweeping the floors and building desks for new students that are coming in the next morning, and then the next day we're meeting the U.S. ambassador to Nigeria and telling him and his wife to come and speak to our students about the program. So that's been my experience, is own your skill set, really own your skill set, and if you're passionate about something and you believe that you can actually affect change, then get in there and be smart about it, but don't apologize for being from where you are or looking how you look. Just get in there and solve that problem.
Thank you so much, Christina. This has been inspiring and I think really valuable for the students in the design thinking class. It's great to meet you and great to talk to you, and good luck with Andela.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I hope the class goes well. It was a delight to speak to you.
Thank you so much.